It's an in-depth look at some of America's most chilling homicide cases. Killer Instinct returned last week for a second season on Investigation Discovery, and I am joined this morning by host Chris Hanson. Good morning, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Natalie. Thank you for having me.
And we're really excited to talk with you, especially coming to you from Tampa Bay, because tonight's episode actually deals with our area.
It is, and it's a very compelling case. We were down there a few months ago working on it. As a matter of fact, it's the case of Anthony Lee, also known as South Beach Wanda, a very famous female impersonator who was killed a couple years ago. And the twists and the turns in this case are just amazing. You may remember the case from covering it there in the Tampa Bay area. But at first, they thought maybe it had something to do with, his alter ego. It was very brash and in your face, and then by the time you get to the end of the story, the end of the episode, the thing is twisted 360 degrees. But we talked to his friends, relatives, we talked to the dogged investigators who worked this case from the Tampa Police Department, and it's really, really interesting because what ID allows me to do is go into the field and conduct these interviews the way I like to do them, and then we combine that with these very cinematic reconstructions, and what you end up with is a mini motion picture.
You know, I'm curious, from a journalistic standpoint, I mean, you are yourself an award-winning journalist, and I would guess that that was your passion, but it seems like your passion has kind of changed through the course of these series that you've done. Is that safe to say?
Well, I think the focus may have changed. My passion has always remained the same. I follow, breaking news and work on a couple different projects all the time. But you're right in that, this is a little bit of a different program, and you wouldn't normally on the evening news do reconstructions. But I think in a show like this, as long as you're absolutely clear about your methodology and you tell people what you're doing, I think it's a very good way to tell a story.
And you're getting this rare access, and you're getting to do these intimate interviews, and I'm assuming that that just absolutely feeds that journalism in you, but trying to educate and tell these stories that we need to hear.
Well, I think by getting into the mind of a criminal and mining the emotions of a victim or a victim's family, you can paint a picture of a crime and perhaps prevent somebody else from becoming a victim.
And that's, of course, being a journalist is something that's so impactful to be able to do. And speaking of viewers and trying to educate viewers, I know you're actually taking to social networking to even interact with some of the viewers with season 2.
Well, absolutely, and we did it somewhat with season 1 as well. But, as you know, I'm sure you tweet and Snapchat and all that every day. We all do as journalists. But it's become an important part of not only, promoting what you're doing, your projects, but also of maintaining this contact with the viewer that, is very important. And it builds a lot of loyalty, I think.
And maybe save the toughest question for last. Since you've been able to progress and now into season 2 with this kind of show and the series, what have you been able to wrap your arms around? What have you learned?
Well, each case, I think, is a slightly different lesson, but what always blows me away, Natalie, is, for instance, in episode 1 of season 2, the victim was absolutely doing nothing wrong, had come home from a 4th of July party, driving down the highway, almost home, and she's victimized by this guy who almost gets away with it. He opens up on her car with an AK-47. She's missing. There's blood at the scene, but they don't know whether she's alive, she's being held captive, whether she's been shot or not, and this case goes cold for such a long time, and they finally pieced it together because of another crime that was committed. So what always amazes me is sometimes it's a little bit of luck, sometimes you make your own luck, but it's really the hard work of these investigators, and the case will grow cold. There's another case coming up on August 8th that has to do with a woman in Newport Richey near you. This case was cold for years, and these guys just kept opening it up. The Pasco County detectives opening it up. It led them to Chicago and back and forth and back and forth, and finally they cracked the case.
Well, Chris, we really appreciate it and glad you're doing a show and a series like this and even talking about Tampa Bay. Thank you so much for your time today. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it, too.